have read a young adult book before, you are probably familiar with the first person present tense point of view. But what exactly is it, and how do you use it to its fullest potential? So I'm going to start by explaining what first-person POV is, then I'm going to give you some examples of it being used well in fiction, and then I'm going to talk about things that you can do and things that you can't do, like the pros and cons of using first-person POV, and the pitfalls that you want to try to avoid when using first-person present POV. Just like with any POV style, this POV allows you to do certain things, and it also doesn't allow you to do certain things, and it makes other things harder. So I'm just going to give you everything that I know about first-person present tense so you can make a decision as to whether or not this sounds like a POV that would be right for your story. So first, what is first-person present tense POV? A POV, or point of view, is the viewpoint in which your story is told. It is the lens through which your readers view or read your story. In a first-person point of view, you are being told the story through the eyes of one character. And in a first-person present tense POV, you are being told the story through the eyes of that one character as the story is happening right now. First-person present is different than first-person past, which is also told from the point of view of one character, but it's that character talking about something that has happened to them in the past. For example, a sentence written in the first-person present tense would be, "I bend over to pet the fluffy dog." This same sentence written in the first-person past tense point of view would be, "I bent over to pet the fluffy dog." A sentence that illustrates the difference between first-person present and first-person past is this sentence from the book Echoes, a young adult thriller by my dear friend Marissa Latte. "All night I toss and turn, unable to fall asleep because I can't stop thinking about the black Suburban and the person in the mask." This sentence, obviously, is written in first-person present tense. You can tell because of the present verb tenses, so I toss and turn, not I tossed and turned, or I can't stop thinking instead of I couldn't stop thinking. In first-person present tense, the reader gets to be inside the main character's head and be right there with them as they experience every single event of the story. There is no person telling the story, there is no narrator. The narrator is the character, but they're not narrating anything, they are simply experiencing the story, and all of the language is reflecting what they are doing and seeing as they are doing and seeing it. First-person present tense has gotten a lot of criticism because people think that it's an unnatural POV because it's not anybody telling the story. It's like the reader is walking alongside the character and getting to experience the story. People think that it's kind of weird, or there's some sort of weird cognitive dissonance with first person where people just don't really feel like they're reading a story or a story isn't being told to them. But I love first person because of how active and present it is. In first person past tense, you can get away with a lot of telling because you have a narrator who's telling the reader the story. They can say, "I went to bed early because I had a final the next day, and honestly, looking back at it, I don't really think I needed to go to bed that early. I just felt that it would probably be a good idea, and I ended up flunking that final anyway, so it didn't matter." You can't do that in first person present because or the character doesn't know that they're gonna flunk their final into the future. They only know what's happening right here and right now. First-person present tense is used in young adult books such as The Hunger Games or Divergent. So what are the pros and cons of first-person present tense, and how do you know whether it's right for your story? The pros of this point of view is that it is very grounded in the moment. The reader gets to be there as the character is experiencing all of the events of the story in order. If the character is in pain, the reader is right there. If the character discovers something new, the reader is right there. The narrator doesn't have any ability to reflect on what is happening. They only get to experience it as it's happening to them. This is really positive as it lends itself to more showing instead of telling, because you have to show what the character is experiencing instead of having a character reflect on stuff that happened in the past. Although you can definitely do too much telling in first person present, but we're not going to get into that right now. First person present also allows readers to get really close to a character. they get to hear about everything that's happening from the inside of that character's mind. And that's a very intimate place to be. I mean, you have to have a compelling character to pull it off, because nobody wants to be trapped inside the mind of either a boring character or a character who's extremely unlikable or really kind of a horrible person. But if it's a character who is relatable and enjoyable, that can be a really cool place to be, because you really get to know that character deeply. But just like with any point of view, first person present also offers its challenges. Your reader has to experience the events of the story along with the character, which means that you can't do as much reflection on what happens in the future and how that colors the events of the past as you can if the book were written in first person past. You also do have some limitations, because your readers can only know what your main POV character knows. So you can't jump around between people's heads, or from an omniscient narrator's perspective, just peek into somebody else's life from up here. Like, you have to be inside their head. So unless you have multiple POV characters, your lens through which you view the story is very limited in one character's mind. This can be great in mysteries or thrillers, because if you're inside the point of view of a detective, you're right there with them as they piece together all the clues and discover new things to solve a big murder case. But it can also be challenging if you only have one POV character and there are scenes that you really want to show that color the world, but that don't involve your main character. Another challenge with first person present tense is that every single narrator who is written in first person present tense has to have their own unique voice. Because you as the author need to sound like you are these different characters as you're moving through the story, you need to adopt different styles or little mannerisms of speech or little things to differentiate your different narrators. And I have found that the only way to do that is by really figuring out what they sound like, because I can't make voices sound authentic unless I can hear them in my head. And until I get to the point where I can read a sentence and be like, oh, this character won't say that thing, or they would say it like this, then I don't really know their voice well enough. Developing your own unique character voices is very challenging. I've made a video on it on this channel before. If you're interested in checking it out, I'll link it in the description of this video. But that is also definitely a challenge of first person present. In my book, I have 4 narrators, and each of my 4 narrators, first person narrators, has a very distinctive voice, because I wanted readers to be able to tell whose point of view they were reading from without even looking at the label at the top of the chapter, just because they sounded and felt different as you were reading. So how do you know if first person present tense is right for your story? As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, first person present tense has received a lot of hate, because I think in a lot of cases, stories don't need to be told in the first person present tense, and it's done in a way that feels jarring or feels like some readers are taken out of the story because they keep being reminded that they are not the character, and they're reading like, I am going to the store, but they're not being told a story by anyone, and it feels a little bit disjointed because there is a little bit of like a brain switch that needs to happen for you to sink into reading prose that reads like, I am doing this right now, because obviously a narrator could not be writing that as if they've already experienced it, because they don't write it as they're doing something. A lot of people enjoy first person present tense in novels that employ multiple timelines. When you have a present timeline and also a past timeline, the present tense can help show when things are happening now versus the past tense, which happens later. In college, I went through a period where I really wanted to write in first person past tense, because I liked the idea of having a narrator who was reflecting back on things that had happened to them in the past. But I found that when I was writing like that, I ended up doing a lot of telling and a little bit too much reflecting, and it felt too much like the narrator was telling me the story, because in present tense, I was forced to only show what was happening right now and cut all of the reflection, which I was told made my prose more engaging. So I stuck with that because I like it. But depending on the kind of book you're writing, this might not be the best point of view for you. First person present tense is extremely common in young adult books. I write young adult books and I mostly read young adult thrillers, so that's the world that I'm in. I also see it being used in a lot of thrillers. If you're on the fence as to whether this sounds like a point of view that you would want to use in your story, I would recommend trying to write in the first person present and read it back and see how you like it. I'd also recommend going and reading books in the first person present tense point of view. I've linked a bunch of them in the description of this video that I personally have enjoyed and have found helpful when studying that style of POV. If you are interested in seeing a more in-depth text analysis where I break down a page of a book written in the first person present tense and explain how all of the sentences are constructed and the choices that the author has made to keep the book grounded in the present, I'd be very happy to make it. So if you want to see that video, comment down below. But that's all I have for this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like it and also subscribe to my channel. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Claire Fraise, and I am an award-winning young adult author who makes videos on this channel sharing the actionable writing tips that helped me make my own writing better. I'm the author of the They Stay series, which is written in the first person present tense point of view if you're interested in checking that out. I hope you have a fantastic week, and as always, happy writing.